How are you? All right, good afternoon. I will start off with a note on the anniversary of Hiroshima. Izumi Nakamitsu, the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, spoke on the Secretary-General's behalf at the commemoration that took place today in Hiroshima of the dropping of the nuclear bomb, which took place on August 6, 1945. In a message delivered by Ms. Nakamitsu, the Secretary-General said that we must recall the core message that the hibakusha, the survivors of the bombs, have traveled the world to spread. The only guarantee against the use of nuclear weapons is the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Inspired by the resilient spirit of the people of Hiroshima, the Secretary-General added that he is fully committed to working with the hibakusha and all others to realize our shared goals, a world free of nuclear weapons. And a statement we issued last night, the Secretary-General strongly condemned the terrorist attack that took place on August 5th in Cairo. He extends his heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims, as well as to the people and government of Egypt, and wishes a speedy recovery to all those injured. And our humanitarian colleagues report that after 3 days of reduced hostilities in the northwest part of Syria, following the ceasefire that came into effect on Friday, fighting has flared up again, including with airstrikes across northern Hama, southern Idlib, and western Aleppo governorate. We reiterate our deep concern for the civilians in Idlib and all surrounding areas. Since the upsurge in violence at the end of April, more than 500 civilians have been killed and over 400,000 people were displaced in the area. And again, we remind all parties to the conflict and those who have influence over them of their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. And a note on refugees, Venezuelan refugees in Colombia. And I can tell you that we join the UN Refugee Agency and the UN Migration Agency today in welcoming the decision by the government of Colombia to grant nationality to children born in the country to Venezuelan parents. The measure will benefit more than 24,000 children born since August 2015 who are at risk of statelessness. It will also prevent children from becoming stateless in the future. UNHCR, IOM, and the UN Children's Fund say they will financially support the Colombian government in implementing this measure to provide these children with documents to prove their nationality. More is online. And I've been asked about Cameroon, and I can say that we continue to follow the situation in Cameroon closely, including the aftermath of the violent riots in the Yaoundé and Buea prisons that took place late last month, and the decision of a number of prisoners to start a hunger strike. We call on the Cameroonian authorities to ensure that the fundamental rights of all detainees are respected and recall the importance to follow due process. The National Commission on Human Rights and Freedom is reportedly engaging with relevant authorities in order to meet with the detainees. We hope that this request will be considered favorably. And just to mention that this afternoon at 2 p.m., there will be a briefing here by Ambassador Samuel Moncada, the permanent representative of Venezuela to the United Nations. Edie. Halas. At least for me, but not for you. Yes, go ahead, Edie.
Thank you, Steph. The Pakistani foreign minister has sent the Secretary-General a letter in which he urges the United Nations to halt any actions that could bring about a material change in the situation on the ground in Kashmir in violation of Security Council resolutions, and to take some other actions. Has the Secretary-General received the letter, and what is his response?
Yeah, we're aware of the press reports the letter has been sent. As of a short while ago, we were not able to confirm that the letter had actually been received. Obviously, once it is, it will be looked at and studied and acknowledged. Sidreis, welcome back.
Thank you. Stephane, yesterday there was a press statement from the Security Council about Libya. Mm-hmm. But I noticed no one mentioned the attack on Morzuk. Morzuk is a southwest town that had been attacked by a pilotless plane, and 43 people were killed, 60 people were injured, and yet there was no statement, neither from the Secretary General nor from the Security Council about this attack. Is there any?
There was a statement from the mission, issued from the statement, and of course the mission speaks for the Secretary General. Yes, Iftikhar, Maria.
Thank you. A follow-up to the question on Kashmir. Stephane, does the Secretary General believe that the Indian action in scrapping the special status of Jammu and Kashmir is a violation of the UN resolutions?
Look, I think we expressed we said very clearly that we were following the developments in the region with concern. The Secretary General's position at this point is to urge all parties to exercise restraint. Maria. No, I understand what you asked, but unfortunately at this point you'll have to settle for that as my answer. Maria.
Thank you, Stephane. So last week, U.S. imposed sanctions on Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif. I wonder, I didn't see any particular reaction from UN on this, and I wonder if you have been in touch with American authorities or Iranian authorities about the possible upcoming visit of Mr. Zarif to Anga High-Level Week, if it will create any problems for him or not.
Well, the Secretary General was asked that question and answered, I think, on his stakeout he did on Thursday. And for him, he called for all parties to avoid anything that would increase tensions. And I think he answered that question. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens at the General Assembly. I can't predict, but the U.S. Has obligations under the host country agreement, as have other countries that host UN headquarters or host UN conferences. And as a matter of principle, we hope that every country that is under such obligations lives up to those obligations. But we'll have to wait and see what happens.
So this matter haven't been discussed, as far as you know, between Secretary General and American authorities?
As the process, and I'm not talking about the case of the foreign minister particularly, but the process that obviously before the GA, countries make visa requests to the U.S. If for the General Assembly or to other countries to attend UN conferences. There's that process which involves the countries and then the host authorities. So we need to let that process play out, but obviously there are obligations under the host country agreement. Ali.
Thank you, Steph. One on Syria. There are, I wonder what are the latest in the developments of the Syrian government assault on Idlib, and also the talks in Turkey about the need to do something in that part of Syria. This is one question. My other question, who would decide whether the missile tests in DPRK are in violation to UN resolutions or not? And what is the, because we have seen repeated tests now, what's the Secretary General's reaction to that development also?
You're covering a lot of geographical ground. Let's start in your part of the world. On Syria, I think I start off the briefing with mentioning our concern about the increased fighting and reporting that, after the ceasefire that had come into effect on Friday, we've seen a flare-up in fighting. Obviously, we're very concerned about the civilian population in Idlib and in all the surrounding areas. As far as the talks in Turkey, I'm as informed or less informed than you are. We've seen the press reports of, I think, U.S. delegations in Turkey. We'll have to wait and see what the outcome of the talks is. On the DPRK, we're obviously very concerned with the recent launches that we've seen by the DPRK. And we reiterate our call for a swift resumption of working-level talks between the U.S. and DPRK as agreed to by the two leaders last June. Yep.
Thank you, Steph. Does the SG have a comment on the latest decision by the U.S. government to impose a full economic embargo against Venezuela? All of the Venezuelan state's assets here in the U.S. were frozen. I wonder if he's got any position or comment on that.
Sure. We've taken note of those latest announcement, that latest development. We, as far as the UN system is concerned, will continue to cooperate with the Venezuelan authorities and other national and international actors to address the needs of the Venezuelan population. I think there is an expectation that all stakeholders act in accordance with humanitarian principles, which including allowing assistance to enter Venezuela. It is very, very important to keep the humanitarian needs of the Venezuelan people first and foremost. Yes, sir, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Stephane. My question is to follow up yesterday's statement from Secretary General on the shooting massacres that happened last weekend in the U.S. My question is, what is the statement from the Secretary General about the control of arms of civilians? And it seems like the Americans has to live with this situation, and even anyone here is exposed to that situation with the control of arms in the U.S.
Look, there is a responsibility for national governments to for the legislation they have in place. The issue of small arms, as covered by the United Nations, refers to the trade between member states, and it is then up to those member states to enact the proper national legislation. Edie.
As a follow-up on Venezuela, is the Secretary General concerned that the measures taken by the Trump administration could affect humanitarian provisions to the people of Venezuela?
Well, so these were announced yesterday. Again, there are some very clear humanitarian principles at the international level, and that is, which means that humanitarian aid needs to be allowed to get in to those who need it the most. Sir.
Hi, thanks. Just to follow up on Oscar's question, it's reported that there are more guns than people in the U.S. Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit, reports that as of Monday, there have been 255 mass shootings this year alone. Does having the UN headquarters in a country where mass shootings are so commonplace affect the safety of UN personnel?
Look, I'm not going to start linking the two. We rely on the host countries' authorities to protect United Nations premises and United Nations staff. Our host country and our host city, whether at the federal, the state, and at the NYPD level, do a tremendous job, and we're very much appreciative of that. Yes, Carmen.
Thank you very much. It also has to do with the humanitarian aid getting into Venezuela. The International Committee for the Red Cross said that it was able to deliver 34,000 tons, or 34 tons of food. What other organization right now do you know is getting aid into Venezuela, and what is the UN? How is the UN also participating in that matter?
The UN has a development and humanitarian presence in Venezuela. We're working according to international principles to make sure that aid is delivered properly along our requirements and our rules. A lot of it is focused on children and maternal health, and I do hope to have a bit of an update on the humanitarian situation later on this week. Alan.
Thank you, Stephane. Are there any updates on the inquiry board? I mean, the stuff, how many persons are going to...
No. When there is an update, you will be the third to know. Secretary-General will know, I will be informed, and then I will let you be informed. All right. Yes, Mr. Iftikhar.
Stephane, how does the Secretary-General view this report by UN experts about Myanmar companies funding military operations in Myanmar. We are asking for sanctions against these companies.
Listen, the fact-finding mission, as you know, is independent of the Secretary-General. It works on a mandate from the Human Rights Council. It is a very important piece of the mechanism, of the United Nations mechanism, around the issues of Myanmar. And I think their recommendations, some are directed to member states, and it will be up to the member states to act upon them. Hamid.
Could you explain to us, Stephane, the criteria in which the Secretary General sometimes issues a statement and sometimes he doesn't? I know he just issued a statement condemning the terrorist act in Cairo, but he didn't issue a statement on destroying 100 apartments with leaving 500 Palestinians homeless in the city of Sur-Bahir. So could you just enlighten us of the criteria when he does issue a statement and when he doesn't? Thank you.
This is not the first time you've asked a question and not the first time I've tried to answer your questions, but we'll go at it again. There are numerous ways through which the Secretariat expresses itself, or the Secretary-General, through statements of the Secretary-General, through the missions, through the SRSGs that represent the Secretary-General, through his special envoys. All those voices are important and carry weight. On the issue that you mentioned, the Secretariat reports back regularly to the Security Council and other organs on developments, and we will continue to do so. Madame, oh yes. Go ahead.
Hi there, thanks so much. All the way at the back. I just got caught in the rain.
Is it raining?
Yeah, it just started bucketing down. My feet are soaking wet. Have you taken a question yet on the AP story about Yemen by Maggie Michael?
Yes, have I taken an question?
I only just arrived. Has anybody?
No, you have not. Would you like to ask that question?
I'll ask a question, please.
Okay.
Have you seen the story? And do you take issue with any of its contents? Have you asked for a correction? Is it accurate as far as you understand?
You mean the story on the allegations?
The really, really embarrassing story about UN workers in Yemen.
Yeah. Well, that's your framing of the story. Listen, we have. I've seen the story. My understanding is that the World Health Organization, as mentioned in the story, is taking these allegations extremely seriously. I think all allegations of the misuse of aid need to be investigated. And my understanding is that an investigation is ongoing and that we have absolutely zero tolerance for any corruption.